Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. Well, it's really a pleasure and a joy to have on the Zoom with us, today, James Nestor. James is an author and journalist who has written for Scientific American, Outside Magazine, New York Times, The Atlantic, National Public Radio, the San Francisco Chronicle, that I read every day, by the way, and more. James has spent the last several years working on a book called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. It released just in May of 2020 and was an instant New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, Sunday London Times, top 10 bestseller. I'm not surprised, by the way. This book explored the million-year-long history of how the human species has lost, the ability to breathe properly, and why we are suffering from many maladies, because of it. I was drawn to your book because in my lifestyle, I'm a seeker, and I got the sense that you are too. I've been practicing some of the material that you cover in the book. I told you that I worked, with Stough. I'm extremely thankful, to you, James, really, that you took the time and, the effort to put all this information in one place. I think it's great. So, I read your book, but if you can share with us what drove you to write this book, to put those years into this work?
Well, it was a few things that inspired me to write this book. I had seen people free dive. This was years and years ago when I was writing a story for Outside Magazine about competitive free diving. And this is this crazy sport where these people take a single breath of air and see how deep they can dive on a single breath. And I didn't know much about the sport and went out to Greece and watched these people. They were small people, tall people, large people. Every range of humanity you can imagine, who through the power of will had trained themselves, trained their lungs to be able to hold their breath for 7, 8, 9 minutes at a time and dive down to depths of 300, 400 feet. No fins at all. I thought, my God, if we can do that with breathing, what else can we do? And so I then set out into labs and started doing some experiments and talked to experts in the field who had told me that we can use breathing to do crazy stuff, like heat our bodies up, to help heal our bodies, to put ourselves to sleep, to wake ourselves up, to help cure a number of diseases. Crazy claims, but the science was very clear. And so I spent several years trying to dig through and find the real story behind all that.
And thank you so much for it. I have been really taken by your book, and I think it's a resource that's just great because you put it all together for people. Now, specifically now, I'm here in Northern California, north of San Francisco, where the fires are raging and the air quality has been the worst I've ever had. And we've had it now for a few years. 2 days ago, in northern Marin County, where I live, on the EPA PM25 AQI scale, the air was 420. That is said to be hazardous and dangerous to anyone, including them. So here we are. Today it's only 170, which is still very, very bad. Are there any specific, from all the vast work that you've done there, specific 1 or 2 things that we can all do here that are breathing this foul air?
So I live in San Francisco, so it hasn't been as bad as it's been in the North Bay, but it's still really bad here. So when the air quality is that bad, the best thing to do is to stay inside. Get your air filter, crank it up to 11, and don't go out. But on most days, it's been around 150 here to 100. Not great, but not good either. Still pretty injurious to the body if you're out there for extended amounts of time. So the very first thing anyone should do, and this doesn't matter if it's smoky out, breathe through your nose all the time. So, and if you can't, you have to find a way of breathing through your nose. So the reason is, if you were to cut my head in half here, anyone's head in half, you would see the most ornate structure at the front of my head. So it takes up about the equivalent volume of a billiard ball. And air is forced to go through this labyrinth. And as it goes through this labyrinth of bones, it is heated, it is conditioned, it is pressurized, and it is filtered. So this is our first line of defense. And you think about 25 to 50% of the modern population is breathing through its mouth. When you breathe through the mouth, you get none of those benefits. So in many ways, you are exposing your lungs. The lungs could be considered an external organ, especially when the air quality is bad. If there's allergens, pollutants, smoke, you're just exposing your lungs to all of that. And you will very likely get some respiratory problems because of it. So the first step is breathe through the nose all the time.
So there will be viewers who are going to say, yes, it's easy for him to say, but my nose is plugged up all the time. If I try to shut my mouth and just breathe, I'm going to choke. What can they do?
Well, I was one of those people. So for years and years and years, and I went down to Stanford. I was working with the chief of rhinology research down there, Dr. Jayakar Nayak, took a CAT scan of my head, and he started laughing, which is not something you want your doctor to do. And he said, "You are so messed up. I've broken my nose 3 or 4 times. I have a deviated septum. I have all these other issues here." So it's hard to diagnose someone, especially I'm not a doctor. I'm not a breathing therapist. I'm a journalist. I don't want to diagnose anything, but some people do need surgical interventions. We know that. But a lot of people don't. And I learned this from the doctor of speech language pathology at Stanford, who was a mouth breather, who could not breathe from her nose. She was slated for surgery, and she started looking into it, and she realized that the nose is really a use it or lose it organ. And she looked at 20 different people who had had laryngectomies, a hole drilled in their throat for one reason or another. And she found that between 2 months and 2 years, their noses were 100% clogged. They could not breathe through it at all because they had stopped breathing through their noses. So taking this information, she started using a little piece of tape on her lips and started really practicing nasal breathing all the time, and her nose completely opened up. So inspired by her, instead of doing surgery, I went that route. And I took a CAT scan 1 year and a CAT scan the year after of practicing nasal breathing, healthy breathing habits. I was just curious what would happen to my airway. I opened it up about 10 to 20% in 1 year, which is an incredible amount. I've never been able to breathe so well. So no bronchodilators. No, I'm not saying these things are bad. People use these, and that's wonderful. Don't go off your medications. I'm just saying the nose is like any other organ, any other muscle. The less you use it, the less you're going to be able to use it. So try breathing through your nose all the time.
Make sure you breathe through your nose at night and you put a strip on your face. I liked how you say, a Charlie Chaplin mustache just move down 1 inch. That's what I do too. But if you feel, oh my God, nothing is coming in, maybe you can use a little saline water or a neti pot or something like this, right?
Absolutely. So there's a bunch of different squirts you can use. They work great, okay? Neti pots work great. So explore all of those different options. And I'm not saying that, you only have to do this naturally. Just start breathing. Don't be a wimp. Use these different options. But I would say before, and this is coming straight from Stanford, okay? This isn't my opinion. Before you rush straight into surgery, try these mellower versions first and work yourself up and see what progress you can accomplish with that. Because the nose is very those tissues open and close, and it is very flexible and responsive to how it is being used.
It's really great. So I mentioned that I was quite taken by the fact that in your book, all of a sudden, I come across the work of Carl Stough. I worked with him quite extensively in the 1980s. He was an amazing guy. He made you, first, before you do anything, come to him for 5 sessions, one day after the other. He was in New York City, so I flew out there 5 days to get to there. And every time, just like you say in the book, you finish the session, your cheeks are rosy, you feel incredible. And he was a very, very touchy-feely guy. He does a lot of hugging and kissing, and it's just a beautiful environment. But he always said, when you take a flight, when you come home after a flight with all the foul recycled air, do my exercises, because he's all about the exhale, get it all out completely. So I tried it last night. I knew we were going to talk. I slept a lot better because I was probably ridding myself of all this junk.
So Carl Stough was one of the many people that I found researching this book that had been almost completely forgotten. So I call it the new science of a lost art, because humans developed this stuff. We found it worked. We used it. Then it would disappear, be replaced by something else. And then someone else would find it in different area, name it something else, and then it would disappear. So he's a great example. Carl Stough was a choral teacher who found his singers would just pack air on top of air. He said they're going to get so much more resonance and volume if they exhale. So he worked the respiratory system, specifically the diaphragm, to get them to exhale more. And then he was reteaching Met opera singers how to sing, who already knew how to sing pretty well. So then he went in, he was invited after doing that for 10 years to go in and try to help emphysemics at the largest VA hospitals on the East Coast. These people were left for dead, okay? They had an oxygen tube in their nose, they had a pillow on their back, and the hospitals didn't know what to do with them. But he went in and just by teaching them how to breathe, did what nobody else could do. And these people walked out of the hospital. And this might sound like some woo-woo anecdotal story. There are x-rays, there is data, there are pulmonologists showing it, and he did it for 10 years. And then, just keep going with this very quickly, he went and taught the U.S. track team, the 1968 U.S. track team, to prepare them for Mexico City. They were the only team to not use oxygen before or after. They said they didn't need to. They knew how to breathe. And they completely destroyed everybody. I think it was still the greatest Olympic performance ever. So this guy just faded away. He had a private practice in the 80s and 90s. I think he died in 2000. But I had to dig so hard to find any information on him. And no one has disavowed his therapies. They obviously work. They work wonderfully. And yet they've just disappeared. And I thought that was so sad. Such a powerful thing was gone again. So when I learned that you had gone there, it blew my mind. I've gotten about 3 or 4 letters from people saying, I'm so happy you found this guy.
What I kept saying to him, this is too good. Write a book, share it, make a video. And we only have this video from the music festival. You know, he always said it's hard to really, you know, that's really a shame, kind of. But a couple of things, you really went down there and described the exhale. So you do, one of the things you do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. And then you keep 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you just say, that's the whole point. You exhale to the max. But I thought it's all written. So since we are on video, I know he was looking for a certain resonance. And when we were doing this, the big, exhale, so, the diaphragm moves, he was seeking a resonance. I figured since it's video, as ridiculous as I may seem, I will make the sound. So the sound he was seeking, at least with me, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I sound a little like a chipmunk, but that was a resonant place that he really liked. And then he also had me sing, because A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, it doesn't matter. But one little vignette, I came home, to California after working with him for a week. On the TV was, an opera. And the lady went into, "Ah," and I said, oh, you know what, I'm going to follow. So I followed her. She was done, and I was going for one more minute. That's what he does for you.
I've heard these similar stories of just being able to engage your diaphragm to exhale more. And, you know, a lot of people, at least from what I've heard, say, oh, is that just a placebo effect? Is it psychosomatic? This is your body. This is a physiological effect of working an internal organ, which we had been told, textbooks had told him, you cannot develop an internal organ. It is impossible. And yet the x-rays showed otherwise. So I think one of the reasons why his therapy didn't live on is because he was so particular about that. You had to listen for this very specific resonance, this very specific tone. And I talked to Lynn Martin, who worked with him for 20 years, side by side with him. And she said he never sat her down to teach her how to do his thing. He was so controlling over it because he said it had to be in this very specific way, which is so sad. There's no manual. There's no video beyond the Aspen Music Festival. There's nothing.
They have a website, and on the website, there's one page that gives a pretty good description of the process. So, and you talked about it in the book. You say you watched the video from the music festival. And it seemed almost like he was abusing that poor guy. But all he was going for is either these arms move back and forth to make room, you know, in the rib cage, or the legs go back and forth, just for, you know, the diaphragm to be as much like a piston that can move easily. That's all the crazy movement.
I agree, and it's obvious it worked. Just look at the x-rays, look at the thousands of people who were healed by him. But to an outsider and to a doctor and to a hospital, that's what I was talking about from their perspective. I mean, it looks like some voodoo thing.
Yeah.
You know, people are singing, he's singing with them, they're moving their arms around. And so for a doc, those guys are so conservative anyway that they just say, this guy's crazy. But they didn't look at the data, and that's what's so frustrating to me.
So, I mean, clearly you cover the air hunger and the, you know, the Buteyko method. And I was wondering, you know, it's been very popular now to talk about, you know, intermittent fasting in food. You know, it's healthy. There are books about. I wonder if there's an equivalent of that, you know, intermittent fasting with air.
There absolutely is, and it's called many different names: hypoxia therapy, breath hold therapy, Buteyko therapy, Papworth therapy. It goes on and on, but it's all doing the same thing. So when you consciously hold your breath, you are able to increase your CO2 threshold. And CO2 gets this really bad rap in the climate, rightfully so. It is causing climate change. You can argue otherwise, but you're wrong. That's what's happening right now. But we need a balance of CO2 in our bodies. And most of us don't have enough for our bodies to work normally. So this hypoxia training, Buteyko training, allows us to carry more CO2 so we can release more oxygen, because with more CO2, oxygen is going to release more easily. This gets very technical, but we've known about it for 100 years. So they're exploring hypoxia training for people with heart conditions, for people with weight problems, for people with metabolic problems, and are finding it has an incredible benefit to them. It helps you lose fat faster because having more CO2 is going to allow more oxygen to offload. And how is fat burned? With oxygen. So you need oxygen to burn fat, and it releases more growth hormones. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. It's not pleasant, which is why people don't like it. But Buteyko had been talking about this for 70 years. And then if you look at Indian pranayamas, breath holding is an essential part of almost every single pranayama practice. So you breathe a lot and you hold your breath. So they've been doing it for thousands of years. And it's interesting now to see science just bolstering what they've already known.
So the expression when somebody's all stressed, just take a deep breath, should really in some ways be hold your breath a little while. Right?
That's what Alicia Muret, who is a Stanford doctor, she now works at Southern Methodist University, had found is a lot of people with anxiety and panic, they have this very low threshold of CO2. So when you breathe too much, you offload too much CO2 because they developed this way of breathing because they associated a higher CO2 level with panic, because the trigger for breathing is not oxygen, it is CO2. So right now, if you exhale, hold your breath, and you feel that need to breathe, that is caused by an increase of CO2. So these people with anxiety and panic don't want that feeling because it reminds them of a panic attack. So they walk around, and when they feel the CO2 going up, they go, guess what happens? They have a panic attack or an asthma attack. So by simply teaching them, the only thing she did is she had them slow down their breathing whenever they felt a panic attack or an anxiety attack come on. And something like 50 to 60% of her patients within the first 2 months had 0 panic attacks. Within 9, don't quote me on these exact numbers, but they were extraordinary. Within, I think, 9 to 10 months, 0 were having panic attacks. Just by controlling your breathing. And again, this is not a placebo. This is a physiological function. You're controlling your breathing, increasing your CO2. It's going to be able to relax you and abate that attack.
So you talk in the book about slowing down the breath rate. You even say that part of your practice now on a daily basis is to try to breathe that magic 5.5 breath. You exhale for 5.5 count, you inhale. How do people go about slowing our breath rate?
The first thing to start with, and this is what I tried to set up the book with, it starts with the problem, and then there's the foundation of healthy breathing. You can read yoga books with 400 different exercises, but they're all doing the same thing. So the first thing is breathing through your nose. That's how you're going to slow down your breath rate. It takes a lot longer to breathe through your nose because of that pressure. That's a good thing. That increase of pressure allows us to get about 20% more oxygen through equivalent breaths through the mouth by just breathing through the nose, that along with nitric oxide. So you start with that, and then you be conscious of your breath. And this is what I've learned from breathing therapists. First thing is be conscious. When you sit down at your computer and you see 40 emails, you're like, oh my God, our breathing goes to hell. And I've seen this in myself. I've worn a pulse oximeter and had other measurements and watched my oxygen levels just plummet the minute I get stressed out. So you become conscious of it next. The other thing I like to do is I take my phone. There's a zillion different apps you can do. You can use an Apple Watch, whatever. And these apps are free. And I set it for about a 6-second inhale, 6-second exhale. You can do 5 seconds as well if that's more comfortable. I say 5.5, but people have written me and said, I was a half a second off. How can I? Oh, no. So it's anything in that ball.
6.
I've created some monsters out there. Anything in that ballpark is completely fine. And I set up my phone so it just has this little sound that just helps me get that rhythm when I start the day off. And this has a tremendous effect. I have borderline higher blood pressure, and I can breathe at this rate, about 6 seconds in, about 6 seconds out. I can take my blood pressure before and after and watch it sink about 10 to 15 points in a couple minutes. I don't know any other medication available that can do that. And that's after a couple minutes. So if you think, just imagine what's going to happen after a couple of days, a couple months. Well, we know because there's been studies looking at people who have been able to take control of their health and really show some enormous benefits from just changing the way they breathe.
I mimicked you just now when you were going 6 in, 6 out. Just in a few seconds, I felt more settled. Just in a few seconds. So nitric oxide, obviously, the miracle molecule, it could be bad, it could be good, but inside of us, it's really good. There are all kinds of medications that people love worldwide that are really based on that. So now, we breathe through the nose, more nitric oxide gets made in the nose and goes straight into our lungs, which means into our bloodstream. Now, I read, and I think you also say, humming makes you create something like there's a study 15 times as much. So what about that?
Yeah, and this is nitric oxide is this miracle molecule, and there's no coincidence why it is now being studied in, I think it's 11 different clinical trials for patients with severe symptoms of COVID. They're giving them nitric oxide, and it's having a tremendous effect. And when SARS, the first SARS, came around in 2004, they were exposing mammalian cells to nitric oxide and finding these cells could live so much longer. So another reason the nose is so important is not only because of the filtering, humidifying, conditioning of the air, it's because it releases about 6 times more nitric oxide than just breathing through the mouth. And nitric oxide interacts directly with pathogens and viruses. It kills them. So Louis Ignarro, who won the Nobel Prize in the 1990s, believes that breathing through the nose could possibly be a way of stopping a huge viral load of COVID from entering your body, a way of really defending yourself. So it's not going to hurt. So humming, as you mentioned, a 15-fold increase. And it's no coincidence why there's so many yoga practices have humming. Just imagine, guess what you're doing? You're humming. A lot of prayers.
Yeah.
You're breathing through your nose. So you don't need to Om. You can do that. That's a wonderful practice. But just by humming, there was one study I read that was crazy. A guy with chronic sinusitis, which is either caused by a virus or a fungus in the nose, hummed 4 times a day and was able to cure his chronic sinusitis just by humming. So it's throughout the day. It might annoy your partner or your coworkers. I guess everyone's working at home now anyway, but give it a try. We know the science is real, and we know it can only benefit you.
But you know, an interesting thing, just like you said about people write to you, oh, I tried for 5.5 seconds, but I came in at 5.6. With the humming too, I told a friend about that. And my friend was very excited. So later I said, well, did you try it? He said, no. I went on the web and tried to find the right mantra, the right humming sound. You know, I think if you just go, it's enough. You don't have to do Om Mani Padma Hum or whatever. Just do it. You know, the Nike way, I guess.
You can do those ancient prayers if you want. You can pick any prayer out of the hat, but you can also sing a pop song. You can hum Dixie. You can hum whatever you want. It doesn't matter. They do believe that lower frequencies might elicit more of a release of nitric oxide. So a lot of but doesn't matter what the tune is.
Low pitch.
Lower pitch, yeah.
You know what? You see a lot of videos of the monks, and they do tend to go low.
Of course they do. Yeah. They've been humming. They've been doing this stuff for thousands and thousands of years. And humming was really a part of so many prayers for so long because it probably made them feel better. And it helped with vasodilation. It's interesting to note that Viagra, what does Viagra do? It releases more nitric oxide. That's how it performs all those functions. It's nitric oxide. So you can hum, you can try that out before you enter into your whatever you choose to do and see how that affects you.
For more helpful videos like this, join my free community at adielgorel.com or click the link below.